Hi everyone, Simon Camilleri here. I just thought I'd share my experience of performing one Peter, or the passages that I learnt from 1 Peter. So I was preparing the performance for a prayer breakfast, and it was a paid performance as well. So there was an extra sense of sort of responsibility. If I was just doing it for a friend's Bible study or something like that, I'd want it to be excellent, but it wasn't. That wouldn't be a professional gig sort of thing. So I had a bit of pressure in preparation, and had a bit of was pretty nervous when I got there. But it's a lovely group of Christians who all love God's word and are very kind and generous. So that always makes it a bit easier as well. So I'd spent about 3 weeks preparing the passage. The majority of the way I prepared it was by just soaking it in, and listening to it over and over again. One of the things I didn't mention in my previous workshop, in terms of listening to it, is actually it's better to listen to a recording of yourself reading the passage than it is to listen to a recording of some professional audio book reader. That other way is really good at before you've got a copy of your own voice, but hearing yourself is almost every time you hear it is like you practicing it. You hear your own voice, and that helps you retain things. And then as you work on the passage, you record it again, and because as you prepare it, you'll start to change the way you do things, and you'll start to understand the passage better, and so you'll have different emphasis and different places where you might pause, and so you want that to be part of what you're listening to as well. It also helped the fact that I studied 1 Peter last year. So I didn't need to do the preparation as much in terms of understanding the text. I already knew what the themes were for 1 Peter. I'd already worked through those passages. There was one verse that I was really stumped on, and realized even as we studied the book last year, we must have just not covered that verse. And that was a verse where it says, "Therefore, since Christ suffered in his body, arm yourselves..." No, not that bit. Where is it? It's the passage. Here we go. "For this is the reason the gospel was preached even to those who are now dead, so that they might be judged according to human standards in regards to the body, but live according to God in regards to the spirit." Now that big, those few couple of sentences, or that's big long sentence really, you can't get away with just sort of glossing over something like that. So I realized I really had to understand what that meant, so that even if there was multiple sort of interpretations, I had to land on one so that I could say it naturally. And even if it wasn't the main point of the passage, I could say it with the right sort of emphasis, so that when people heard it, they at least got that I knew what I was talking about, even if they didn't exactly follow the meaning. That's, if you sound like you don't know what you're talking about, then no one else has got a chance to understand it either. So I worked on that, and I won't spend the time here. You might be curious, but I won't spend the time here explaining what I came to conclude that meant. But that was an important part of the process, going through, making sure I understood every line, basically, and began to be more and more familiar with it. Then it was really the last week that I sat down with the text and went through it to learn it. So technically, you could say I learnt it in a week, but I started the process of learning it 2 weeks before that, in starting to listen to it lots and lots. And then months before that, I studied the passage. So it's very hard to say how long does it take to learn the passage. But I'll show you a bit of what my text looks like. As you can see here, it is just covered with pictures and notes, and weird diagrams that make sense to me. And what I started doing is, as I'd, some of these are like Salvador Dali sort of images, but it's the flow of the passage. You can see here, whoever would love life and see good days. So that's my love and see. I don't know if you can see it. There you go. Love and see. And then I've got these numbers on this character here. So it would keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. They must seek peace. Here you go. Up here. Seek peace and pursue it. All these sort of things. They would. Oh no, that's the 3 is turn from evil and do good. It's good for thumbs up. They must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are against those. So I draw little diagrams to help me understand the flow of what Peter was talking about. And sometimes I would draw diagrams to trigger my memory. So what I would do is over time I'd be going through it and then go, okay, I understand the flow. That bit flows onto that bit and that flows onto that. That makes sense. Like at the beginning it's finally all of you be like-minded, love one another, be compassionate, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate, humble. So that's all heart stuff. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. So that had a sort of rhythm. But on contrary, repay evil with blessing. Okay, so there's the rhythm suddenly changes to blessing, and then the blessing is the link to the next section where it goes, for to this you were called so that you may inherit a blessing, right? So there's these linking ideas. So, and some of them just naturally, okay, that flowed onto that flowed onto that. And then you got to some sections where I'm just like, no, there is no link. There is nothing in my brain that I can get from that idea just naturally to the next one. And I'll show you an example of that here, right? So that's actually at the end of this weird passage, right? It finishes, but live according to God in regards to the Spirit. And then the next thing is a new idea. The end of all things is near, right? So he's sort of moving into a new idea, and I couldn't feel a natural flow. It's not that I couldn't understand why he's talking about it, but I just wasn't remembering. I kept tripping up. And you can tell that by this star. So these black stars, what I would do is I'd try and do the text after a while. I'd try and just say it, and I'd record myself, or I'd just do it out. And wherever I went, what's next? I'd draw a star, because I'm like, okay, that's a spot in which I've found a stumbling block. I found something that makes it tricky to learn. So I need something there that will trigger me so I don't keep stumbling at that point. And so this was one of those where it goes, but live according to God in regards to the Spirit. And what my picture is, I don't know if you can see that, it's a picture of a boat with the word Spirit on it, and then the word the end, and it's crashing into the end. Now that Spirit boat is something that's very Australian. There's a boat that goes to Tasmania called the Spirit of Tasmania. And for some reason, the word Spirit, the image that I could pick that would stick in my mind was the Spirit of Tasmania, this boat, and I could see it crashing into this giant the end, like right on the edge of the page there. Crash, and that was a weird enough image that it really easily stuck in my mind. So whenever I heard the word Spirit, and interestingly, in this passage, he doesn't talk about the Spirit very much. So it was the only time. So when I got to that word Spirit, I immediately had this image of the Spirit of Tasmania crashing into a giant The End. Hit the end. I get that image and I remembered the end. And so the next line is, the end of all things is near. Now, funny story. When I actually performed this, I was flawless up until that very moment. So I did it all and it was going great. And, I had a good connection with the audience there, and I could tell I did a little introduction before, and I got some laughs and I got some moments of heaviness as I told some stories and before I started the passage. So I knew people were with me, and that's always comforting. And everything was going, and my brain was remembering everything quite naturally. Everything was just flowing into the next passage, and I was performing and bring it all. And then I got to that moment and it triggered the memory, the spirit. The end of all things is near. Great. The end of all things is near. And I said that with confidence. And then I went blank. And I went, the end of all things is near. The end of all things is near. And I just sort of stood there and took a couple of steps and tried to let my brain remember what was next, and I just couldn't. And it was, usually I can just pick it up, but it was truly just a stumbling block moment where I just could not remember what was next. And the weird thing is, at with a normal performance, if that happens, maybe there's someone else on stage or someone in the wings who calls out to you and says, who gives you the life, feeds you line, or you just deal with it if you're a real professional. When you're at a prayer breakfast, everyone in the audience has a copy of the script when you're performing the Bible. So half of everyone at this prayer breakfast pulled out their phones and started looking up 1 Peter 4 on their phone, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then one lady, very kind lady, said, do you want me to? And my only option was to go to my bag and look at my own script, so I said sure. And she went and she showed me her thing, and it was in King James. And this is where I actually went, okay, although I've had a sort of failure here, actually, the fact that I've learnt the passage as a whole meant that it wasn't a problem for her to show me, sort of Old English King James. I could still work out where in the passage it was and what I was up to, because I hadn't just learnt NIV word. I understood the meaning of it. So I went, of course, the end of all things is near, therefore be alert and of sober mind. And I made a joke about, clearly I wasn't sober. And I sort of made a joke about it. People laughed and they warmed up to the fact that, I was back on track, and I kept going, and I brought that plane home and landed it. And so we were about halfway at that point, and it was, and the rest of the half went perfectly fine. And in fact, a failure like that, or where I stumbled and picked it up and kept going, actually probably made the second half even better, because I was much more relaxed. This was a lot of people were in suits. There were some politicians at this event. I was getting paid to do it, so I was pretty nervous getting up there and wanting it to be sort of as perfect as possible. And so then when you make a mistake, you've still got people are still on your side, then all your fears disappear. So when I got back into it the second half, I didn't have any anxiety. I just could do it. I thought I did the first half really well as well, but at that point, a lot of that anxiety just disappeared. and I was able to, I did a lot of the second half walking up to people. So in the second half of 1 Peter, there's 1 Peter 4, there's the sections where he says, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. And I started walking in amongst or in around people and looking at people. I was always looking at people in the face, but I was standing back a bit. At that moment, I was able to go right up to people, and people just really warmed up to that as well. And it was lovely. And then at the very end, my favourite line, which is really the thrust of the whole message of this passage, was, it says, but if you suffer, it says, if you suffer, let it not be as a murderer or a thief or or any other type of criminal, or even as a meddler. However, if you suffer as a Christian, do not be ashamed, but praise God that you bear that name. And I love that line, and that's right near the end. And so that was sort of the moment that you can conclude on and have a great sort of emotional punch at the end. And it came together really well. It's great. I haven't actually learnt a passage, committed it to memory and performed it for a while, for maybe a few, possibly a few years. I've done lots of performing of scripture, but not committing them to memory. And I used to do it lots and lots and lots. Like I used to do it for years. I did it sort of almost full time. And so it was great to put some oil on those creaky joints and learn it. I really wanted to give myself a challenge by doing an epistle. And I realized how the difference between Peter and Paul is. Paul is very, his arguments flow a bit better than Peter, and he goes on tangents, but they're always sort of, I found it easier with Paul to find the emotional current of where he's traveling. Peter was like idea, and then this word links to this new idea, which has a word in it that links to this idea. And all the ideas is building a big picture, but they're not necessarily as, they didn't flow as well as Paul's were. And it's funny, Peter says about Paul's writings that they're sometimes hard to understand. Well, Peter, you've got your own, that's the pot calling the kettle black, I say. But yeah, so it was a great challenge to do. I could have just done a narrative, and narratives are much easier to learn. I'd love to run a workshop for people on performing narratives or learning narratives, as well as learning epistles. And if there are any of these sort of stuff that you're interested in and want to do yourself, please do get in contact, because for years I did it, and then due to a whole range of issues, the Backyard Bard, which was the theatre company that I started that did this, sort of went dormant. And I never thought of it as dead. I always thought of it as just like the bear's gone into hibernation. And with a couple of things last year, with the Book of Job being a performance, which we did under the Backyard Bard title, which if you haven't seen, you should check out. You can go to job.thebackyardbard.com and check that out. But yeah, from then, other things have come up. We've got people asking for me to run workshops here and there and do performances here and there. And then this has come up. So who knows? The bear may be waking up. So if you would like training or would like to just chat about it, I won't necessarily say yes, because I always say yes to too many things, but I would love to work out how I can encourage you in that. But yeah, hopefully this was good to see a bit of the journey. It was of me preparing this. I'm sure I've left lots out in terms of my preparation, but yeah, hopefully it was encouraging to you, and hopefully I can do a proper video performance of the piece so you can see it. There was someone who recorded the one I did at the prayer breakfast, and I'm going to hopefully get some footage of that because it includes the moment where I went blank, and I actually think it'd be great to show that, to show one, how even someone who's done this for lots of times can go blank, but also how you can still win your audience back. It doesn't need to ruin the whole thing and you run off stage crying. You can get back on track, and you can still, if you have a warm audience and you've it doesn't need to ruin everything, and it sometimes is the best thing to happen. It keeps you humble as a performer and as a Christian, and it helps you realize that you are always relying on both your words and your stuff ups. You're relying on God's Spirit to use your words and stuff ups, not just your perfect words. So it's a good reminder for me, and I hope it is for you too. Cool. Okay, thank you all. I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.